we've been looking at the idea of why read the Bible, why even mess with it, why bother with it, and we've looked at a lot of different attitudes that sometimes people have towards the Bible. I've gotten by so far without it, that kind of stuff, and so we looked at week one was to because the Bible gives us answers to the things that we go through in real world, in real life. Week two, we looked at the way that the Bible brings us comfort that really is we are unable to grasp apart from it. The third week, which was last week, we looked at the idea of we read the Bible to know God, because we see in the Bible a God who is not tame. And what I mean by that is sometimes we try and put God in a box, like we know exactly how he's going to act, and he's always going to act how I want him to act, and he's never going to do anything that I don't like, and all these different things. And we looked at last week the idea that no, that really is not the accurate picture of the God of the Bible, and these are things that we really wouldn't know unless he revealed himself to us, that we could know. If you're a fan of reading, there's a book that really, or a series of books that really helps us with this idea. It's called The Chronicles of Narnia. It was written by a guy named C.S. Lewis. You've probably heard of him. And one of the things he talks about is he always portrays God being like a lion in the book. And they always say Aslan's the name of the lion, but it's representative of God. And it says Aslan is not a tame lion, and that's exactly right on point with the God of the Bible. He's not a tame God. He's not something that you can just always know how he's going to act in every situation. When I was in college, oh boy, college. Wow, I don't know why I went to college. I really don't. I really didn't need the degree, but I think that it seemed like the thing to do, and I ended up with a bunch of debt and no idea why. As it turns out, most jobs that people go to college for either don't exist or you don't even need a college degree for, so kind of a waste of money. But, if you think that college is good, then right on you, it's good to have dreams and goals and whatnot. Maybe more cost-efficient ones, though. Anyways, when I was in college, we did the dreaded group projects. If you don't know what that is, that's where the professor says, hey, I want you guys to not have as much fun as I am not having teaching you this class. Therefore, I want to waste your time by having all four of you, do the same thing, but all differently, and it's going to mesh, and it's not going to work, and it's going to go up in flames. Have fun, and I'm going to grade you at the end of the semester. Oh, and by the way, half your grade depends on it. The great joy of group projects. So if you know anything about this, it goes something like this. There's no communication. Typically, there's 4 different students working on a group project, and typically, there's the one person who's the go-getter. This would be like Diana. Everything has to be perfect on the group project. And then there's the other person who doesn't give anything to this group project. They couldn't care any less, and they already don't care. And then there's the people in the middle where they mean to. It's just that the different things got in the way, like, oh, there was spirit night, and there was homecoming, and there's all these different things. And so I didn't get time to work on it. And you have this wide spectrum. And so you have these 4 parts of this group project that really don't fit. There's no cohesion for them. They're 4 disconnected pieces. Only thing I can imagine is if you told someone, hey, make a dessert, and you didn't tell them what the theme was. And so 4 different people say, okay, I'll make this part of this dessert, and I'll make this part. So you have one person making like a peach cobbler, and another person making like, a fruit salad, and then, all these different things, and then there's always the one person who's like, I brought spinach as my dessert because health food is enough. There's always that one person. So they bring all these different things together, and like, oh, well, now it's time to put this meal together, and these ingredients do not go. I mean, they just don't fit. And that's exactly what's going on with group projects. And, when I got married, I realized that marriage is a lot like a group project, too. You've got your wife or your husband, depending on whatever, and then you've got, God, and this whole complex scenario that's going on there. That brings me to another kind of, I guess, thought that entered my brain after I realized that marriage is a lot like a group project. For instance, when your kids marry someone that you don't want them to marry, and so you stick your fingers in there rather than butting out, and kind of wreak havoc on their marriage because you can't let go because you're a control freak. And there were crickets. Marriage really works a lot better if the family's involved too. Because whether you like it or not, you're stuck with those people. Oh boy. Whew. And, going past marriage life is, as a Christian, is a group project. A lot of people like to pretend that it's not. Oh, it's just me and God. We're cowboys roughing it out in the dunes, But it really doesn't work like that. God actually has a series of different things, different members in our group project. There's obviously God. And then there's the help that we need from the church. We have to communicate with one another. We have to put in the time to grow. There's a lot of different things there. So it's kind of like a group project, which brings me to the fourth reason to read the Bible, to learn to love people. Read the Bible so you can love people. And you might say, now, hold on. How is the Bible going to help me love people? Well, I'm glad you asked. One important way is it refutes bad ideas that we have. Okay? Here's a bad idea that we get. I have to love myself so I can love others. How do you know if you have a problem with pride? Do you just weigh your heart and say, I don't think I have a problem with pride? How do you know that you're not carrying around old baggage and old hurt and old offenses? Well, I don't feel like I am anymore. No, that's not how. The way you know if you're still carrying around offenses that people have done to you is your actions. The actions. The words that you say, the things that you do. See, temptation is not a sin. It's not a sin. Jesus was tempted. We will be tempted. People are tempted to do different things. Some rather, it's what we do, the action that follows, that we decide on. Now there's where the sin gets involved. So let's look at the statement here, I have to love myself so I can love others. Well, that would actually be false because love is an action. Love is an action. So what are you saying? You have to revolve your whole life around serving yourself so that you can then go out and serve other people? That doesn't make any sense. See, what people oftentimes misunderstand is you have to accept yourself. Yes. Yes. And I'll tell you why you have to accept yourself. First off, because you will never fully accept God if you do not accept yourself. See, because God says things about you. He says, I say this, and you can either choose to believe it or you can choose to disbelieve it. Like, for instance, God says, once you enter into his family, you ask Jesus for forgiveness, that you are an adopted son. You are his child. Now, you can either stand in that truth, or you can spend the rest of your life beating yourself up. I'm not good enough. No, you aren't. You didn't understand the memo. You were adopted. There is no good enough. You get what I'm saying? You have to accept yourself, yes. You have to accept what God says about you when he says that you are made in the image of God. These are things that you have to accept about yourself, even when you don't see it. But that doesn't mean that you have to love yourself in order to love other people, because you will naturally love yourself. Loving is an action. It's that terrible, terrifying action that causes us to orient our whole lives around ourselves. We naturally do the things that feel best for us. We naturally love ourselves. We might not accept ourselves. We might go to the grave not accepting ourselves. But from birth, we love ourselves. We don't want to share our toys with our siblings. When we're teenagers, we don't want to listen to our parents. We want to date who we want, when we want. When we're adults, we want to, see what I mean? Loving ourselves is something that comes very, very naturally to all of us. And I will say this, you also have to take care of yourself. Go to sleep, exercise, eat healthy. These are great things. Again with the spinach. At least it's not broccoli. Amen. Oh man, broccoli. God. I honestly think that sometimes God puts some things on the planet just to see how gross of foods we would eat. Let's put broccoli down there and see what happens. Oh, they ate it. Gross. Okay, I'm joking. Anyways, so no, you do not have to love yourself. Now, how do you know this? Well, because the Bible shows us that. Now, I'm not going to get sidetracked on that. It's just a point. Now, we looked at last week the idea that the ancient laws of the time that the Bible was written, they existed before the Bible. Absolutely, we said that last week. But unlike them, and I mentioned this last week, that God connected worshiping Him with how we treat people. I mentioned that last week. So then people come to this inevitable conclusion: I don't understand the Old Testament. It's too outdated, so I simply will not read it. I'll read the New Testament. But here's a little piece of info gristle. Bam! Everything in the New Testament is based off the Old Testament. Everything in the New Testament is based off the Old Testament. I actually found out that that's something that a chef does. He always goes, bam! I didn't know that. I was copying him. I didn't know I was copying him. So here's some examples of how the New Testament reiterates what the Old Testament says. In Exodus 22:21, you shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. And then we see the exact same thing in Matthew 7:12. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Oh, okay. Exodus 23:4-5. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall bring it back to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying down under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving him with it. You shall rescue it with him. You will help him. No ifs, ands, or buts. You will do it. Matthew 5:44. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. The exact same thing. The only difference is they didn't understand it the first time around, so we went for round two. Leviticus 19:2. Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel, and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Holy means to be set apart for a dedicated purpose, something more so than just fulfilling your own desires all the time. John 14:21. Whoever has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me, and he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. The exact same thing once again. Deuteronomy 11:18-19. You shall therefore lay out these words of mine in your heart and in your soul, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall teach them to your children, talking of them when you are sitting in your house, when you are walking by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. And here again we see the exact same thing in 2 Timothy 2:15. Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who has no need to be ashamed, rightly handling the word of truth. Again, the exact same thing said in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. The reason why we don't realize this is because we don't read the Old Testament, because it's old and scary and stuff. But you'd be surprised how much of it you'd actually understand if you just try reading it. Yes, you will hit some things that you don't understand. The same is true in the New Testament, or any book, or any conversation. Sometimes people say things, and there's the perceived reality of what you think that they are saying, and then there's the actual reality of what they are actually saying. And this happens on daily conversations every single day. Somebody will say something, and you misunderstand what they're saying because your mind is at a different place than their mind is coming from when they said it. Okay, so then the Bible reveals that God has a standard for right and wrong. We looked at this last week. In Romans 6:19, look what it says. It says, just as you once presented your members as slaves to impurity and to lawlessness, leading to more lawlessness, so now present your members as slaves to righteousness, leading to sanctification. But that begs the question, how do we possibly know what is righteousness and what is lawlessness? The Bible. But how can we possibly know if we do not read the Bible? So how can I love my neighbor if I do not know what love is as shown through the law? See, all of us have an idea of what love is. An idea of it, a glimpse of it. We know that, for instance, when we love a girl and we're teenagers, that we should bring them flowers or something like that. Or we know that if I love somebody, I should do something for them, right? Action. But yet somewhere we get lost in the translation, and it comes to something along the idea of this. I showed them love, they spurned me, I'm free from loving them. See, their reaction to how I acted means it's okay for me to not act loving. We see it happen in every situation. day in and day out. For those of you who are in quarantine, you, for instance, know how quickly you can fight with your spouse. Ooh, so glad I'm not. Anyways, what were we saying? I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. Just joking. Just joking. Just joking. But for instance, you can say, "Oh, I love my spouse," but it's the things that you do that show whether you love your spouse. It's easy to say, "Oh, I love God," but it's how you treat people, the action, that shows how you love God. See, love without action is not anything. It's just simply an emotion, a feeling. If you've been alive longer than, 10, 20 years, you probably know that emotions come and go. One day you're head over heels over this person, and then the next day you fell out of love with them, because that's a thing. Love is an action. You can't fall out of action with somebody. That doesn't make sense at all. You can have feelings that come and go, but love is completely separate from that. Now, I will say that, different conversation though, but there is usually emotions that go with things, but our emotions don't guide us and dictate us. So then that brings us to another idea. I'm not responsible. I'm not responsible for you. It's not my problem if I accidentally lead somebody to sin, if I accidentally tempt somebody else. I'm not accountable to other people. I can live my life for myself, and that's their problem. You have to just deal with it yourself. Well, let's go through a couple lists here. 1 Timothy 4:12, set the believers an example in speech and conduct, in love and faith and purity. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. And Jesus said to his disciples, temptations to sin are sure to come, but woe to the one through whom they come. Pay attention to yourselves. If your brother sins, rebuke him, and if he repents, forgive him. And if he sins against you 7 times in the day, and turns to you 7 times, saying, I repent, you must forgive him. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. Romans 14:13, therefore let us not pass judgment on one another any longer, but rather decide never to put a stumbling block or hindrance in the way of a brother. How much we miss that standard. So if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, I don't have the next verse, but it says, leave your sacrifice, leave it. God doesn't want it until you make what's right with that person. Now, never mind. 1 Corinthians 10:32, give no offense to Jews or to Greeks or to the church of God. Give no offense to anybody. Now, obviously, you will not be able to attain perfection. Let me just hit you with that, just in case you were wondering. No, you will never be perfect in this life. However, there's a difference between people who are just easily offended and accidentally offending them and people who you are purposely trying to irritate. When you accidentally irritate somebody, go and make it right. Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. See what I mean? Is there anything I can do to fix this? I'm sorry I acted like that or said that. Why am I sorry? Because it offended you. Now, granted, though, there are going to be, just in case you didn't know, there are going to be some people who refuse to be consoled. Do what you can and leave it at that. Do what you can. What people do is they say, well, I tried. Not really. I mean, you didn't really try, but okay. That's a conversation for another day, though. Okay, so loving others is more than just having your own way. And sometimes we find that in life, without even giving forth an effort, we are causing offense. Look at what Leviticus 22:20 says. I'm sorry. I forgot to mention one of the verses. It's 2 Timothy 3:1-2. There will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers of self. It goes on through a list of different things, but just in case you didn't know, there will be difficulty because people will be lovers of self. You don't be a lover of self. Okay. Leviticus 22:20, you shall not offer anything that has a blemish, for it will not be acceptable for you. See, sometimes we offer an inferior service to God or to others, and then we make it out like it's their problem. Sometimes we offer an inferior service to others, and then we act like it's their problem. You didn't seem like you heard me. I wanted to make sure we were looking at the same verse here. Okay, that's the one. The idea here, the idea here is that sometimes we try and make it like life is all about us. I see it happen in the church oftentimes. You should be lucky that I'm even doing a ministry at all. Oh, I didn't know that's how we were doing things, but okay. I've been faithful, and nobody else was, so you better not come and tell me how to do my job. Okay, all right, calm down. Withdraw the claws, fearsome tiger. Goodness sakes. And I could really go on with this. Oh, here's another example. You're married, and your spouse asks you to do something, and you don't really do it. Or if you do, you just do it barely enough to where they'll get off your back. And there were crickets. Okay, so once again, we're not talking about perfection. We're talking about loving each other with faithfulness. Loving each other with faithfulness. You will have disagreements with people. You will have people that you do not naturally get along with. We're talking about staying faithful through it. That's what we're talking about here. So, there are many things that do not show love that people today accept as normal. I'll give you a few examples. Adultery. If I fall out of love, then it's okay for me to move on. Another example, pornography. It's a victimless crime. Not true, by the way. Pornography is actually one of the leading causes of sex trafficking. So, not really a victimless crime. Just because you sit behind your computer doesn't mean that it doesn't have effects on the world. With that being said, pornography is something that's very, very commonly accepted. I'm very puzzled by this one. Suddenly it's become okay to look at people without their clothes on. I don't get that. At least when I was in porn, I understood that what I was doing was wrong. You know what I mean? And there was a war, and I was trying to progress somewhere. Okay, all right. But what do you do when it's an accepted practice and everybody says, hey, it's totally normal to do this? Anyways, cheating on taxes, you see a lot of people do that one too. Gossip, one of the biggest things. Griping and complaining, just always having an opinion about something that's negative and said with a bad attitude. You know what I mean? Have you ever had an opinion and voiced it with a crappy little attitude when you probably should just fix your attitude? Have you ever done that? No? Am I the only person in the whole building that has done this? Okay, all right. Jeez, way to make me feel condemned. So the Bible teaches us not to look down on others. Matthew 7:12. Let me read a few other verses before I get to that one, actually. No, we're not going to look at Matthew 7:12 because we looked at it earlier. Instead of that, Romans 2, verses 1, 3, 12, and 24. Now, if you feel inclined to set yourself up as a judge of those who sin, let me assure you, whoever you are, that you are in no position to do so. For at whatever point you condemn others, you automatically condemn yourselves, since you, the judge, commit the same sins. Well, I don't commit the same sins. They're a pervert. Yeah, and you're a hypocrite and a judge. So you didn't get the memo there, did you? What makes you think that you who so readily judge the sins of others can consider yourself beyond the judgment of God? What makes you think that you can condemn this other person for their sin and that God will hold you as sinless for your sin? Do you get what he's saying here? What is fooling you in your mind to where you think you can condemn and judge other people and then that God won't himself judge you for your sin? Unless we are saying that we are beyond sin, in which case you're a liar. All who have sinned without knowledge of the law will die without reference to the law, and all who have sinned knowing the law shall be judged according to the law. Oh, it's different. I'm better than them. I know the Bible. I'll back up and read it again, okay? All who sinned without knowledge of the law, without knowledge of God's word, they sinned not knowing the truth, will die without reference to the law. and all who have sinned knowing the law shall be judged according to the law. See, there's a very common thing done today where we hold people of the world to the same standard as the church. And I don't understand it. I really don't. I don't see any biblical warrant for it either. Well, for instance, we go and tell people how they're living in sin with this, they're living in sin with this, they're living in sin with this. They're not saved. What does it matter what sin they're doing if they're not saved? Like, if you claim to be a Christian and you're living boldly in a sin and just saying, oh yeah, God will forgive me for my own stupidity, you're wrong. And there's some definite things that need to happen there. But if somebody's not even a part of the church and you're rushing out to tell them, hey, what you're doing is wrong, might not be the best of ideas. The name of God is blasphemed in the world because of you. Oh, boy, that hits like a brick. Let's look at another one. Matthew 5:7, I believe, is for this part. Yep. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Galatians 6:1. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Oh, that's different. I'm better than them. See, the Bible teaches us not to look down on others. We just sometimes miss that memo. And then we say things like this, at least I'm not as bad as they are. They are disgusting. Their sin is terribly disgusting. And you know the ones I'm talking about, because as soon as I said disgusting, something entered your brain of a certain group of sinners that you think are worse than you, right? I know how this works. I'm self-righteous too. When I said disgusting, there was a certain type of sinner that entered your brain, and you said, oh, them. You know what I'm talking about. Lucy, you know. Okay, all right. So this whole idea of I'm not responsible for them. You do you. You just do you. You're not responsible for them. False. Completely false. Philippians 2:15 says this, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. Or take, let me see where the reference is here. Romans 12:17. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. Okay, some sobering verses there. You get what I'm saying when I say that the Bible teaches us to love people? How to love people? The Bible teaches us how to view ourselves. It says that we're nothing but a vapor, yet it also says that we're made in God's image and worthy of the ultimate price. You have this contrast in the Bible. See, when you don't read the Bible, you either will become full of yourself or you will become someone who constantly condemns yourself and sees yourself as nothing but a failure. With the Bible, it gives us that rude awakening, you are a vapor. But then it also gives us something to cling to. But, O vapor, you have been adopted as a son of God. See what I mean? Now we can see ourselves in light of who we are. We will all one day die. We do not have power over the future or over ourselves. But the one who does have power has called us something else. That's great. The Bible changes how we naturally think, and it changes who we are. Psalm 119:11 says this, I have stored up your word in my heart. Why? That I might not sin against you. I have studied your word. I've studied the Bible so that it can change me, so that I will no longer be this. But you can take this and make something else. And we see it elsewhere in Ephesians, I believe, where it says that maybe Philippians, that he who started a good work will see it through till completion. He's not going to give up halfway through the journey. We naturally form groups and cliques. Did you know this? We realize it in high school, but in life we do this too. This is our clique in the church, and we separate ourselves from that clique over there because I just don't like you. My clique actually doesn't have a pastor in it because I don't really like him, but, don't tell him that. So. Oh, he's listening. Oh, I thought he was on his phone. We naturally form groups and cliques, and then we just break ourselves away from people who are less desirable or people that we don't naturally get along with. We don't naturally forgive. We naturally look down on others, and I'm not just talking about racism. We naturally come to the idea of our sexual sin being okay. regardless of whether it's something in your lusting or something in your action, we naturally come to the conclusion that ours is okay, but somebody else's is not. When you hear married men say, it's okay for me to look at porn because my wife won't have sex with me, so this is the alternative to cheating on her. When you hear married men say this, married men, okay? That's just one example. I don't want to go on too much here, but we naturally see our own thing as okay. And the worst thing about it is the longer we're left with our own thoughts, the more we justify our own selves. Unless something breaks into our natural thought patterns, our thinking continually deteriorates. Continually. Think of it, for instance, as when you were a kid. There were some things that you really felt passionate about, and then as you get older, they just kind of fall by the wayside. You know what I mean? And some things that you said, oh, I'll never do that, and you end up doing it. We naturally talk bad about others. We find all kinds of different reasons to talk bad about others. Some people think that because their skin color is different, they can talk bad about others. Some people think that because they're a man or a woman, that they can talk bad about the other sex. Some people talk bad because we find things. We find things. We all think we have our own excuses as to what makes us better than somebody else. Because, hey, at least we're not as bad as them. We naturally judge people. We naturally look out for ourselves. These are the things that we naturally do. The Bible teaches us not to do those things. The Bible teaches us to love people, and it teaches us what love is. The Bible teaches us how to get past unfairness, how to really love God, that loving people, not just in what we say, but in what we do, is worshiping God, and what it really means to love selflessly. The Bible teaches us what it means to really love selflessly, forgiving the unforgivable, loving the unworthy, staying faithful, humbling yourself. See, but we say things like this: they hurt my feelings, they did me wrong, they really messed me up, therefore I have an excuse. And the Bible says, nope. But the problem is we don't read the Bible, so we don't learn to love in a deeper way. So let's wrap this up. Here's the big idea I want you to get from this. If we are not reading our Bibles, we will not know how to correctly love people. If you're praying to God, Lord, help me to love this person, teach me how to love, all these different things, and you're not reading the Bible, that's a very half-hearted effort. That's a really half-hearted effort. If we are not reading the Bible, we won't feel a need to invite people. We won't invite people to church. We won't see it as it's not my job, it's not my mission. If we aren't reading the Bible, we won't see that it's our job to restore people to God. This church, Tularosa Community Church, exists to restore people to God and build bridges in the community. If you're not reading the Bible, those won't seem like something for you. It'll seem like, oh, that's a good thing for the church to say, but you won't see it as your mission too. When you read the Bible, you start to see the need. I need to start inviting people. I need to start rubbing arms with people. I need to start restoring people to God, not so that I can get something out of it, but so that I can show God to someone. We will start to see the need to love and serve people. Now get this, we'll see the need to love and serve people who aren't like us. See, we naturally don't love those who are different. This one is not the same as me. It can be in outward appearance, it can be in character, whatever. We all see something in others that makes us say, I don't have to love them because they're not part of my group. They're not part of my posse. I'm not going to be riding into town in high noon on a horse with that one. See what I mean? Because we see, okay, this person, they're not like me. But when we read the Bible, we start to see that we have to love people who aren't part of our posse. And when we read the Bible, we can start to see people in situations differently. And honestly, I think that's probably worth it in and of itself, if for no other reason, to read the Bible. I think that's a pretty good reason to read the Bible right there. Oops. So we're going to go ahead and close up there. God, we just pray that you'd help us to learn how to love. by reading your word, and that the things that we read in the Bible, that we would put into action. And we'd stop giving ourselves excuses for not obeying you, but instead say, yes, Lord, here am I. I will listen and I will obey. And we would start loving those people who we see as unlovable. People beyond grace. Disgusting people. That we would see them as people that you have made and that you love. And instead of being so self-righteous about it, that we would learn humility in your presence. And as we read your Bible, we learn to let our pride die. And we just thank you for everything you're doing in us and through us. And we thank you for your word, that we can know how to love people. Amen.